football, our national sport. We know it as the beautiful game, but football can have an ugly side. Racism has a long history in the sport, and after a number of high-profile incidents last season, once again, it's under the spotlight. I've been speaking to kids, ex-professionals, and some of the most important figures in the game to find out if racism still exists in football. Last year, the top flight of English football was different from recent seasons. Manchester City were crowned champions for the first time in 44 years, but the 2011-2012 season also made headlines for the wrong reasons.
The Liverpool striker Luis Suarez has tonight been banned for 8 matches and fined £40,000 for racially abusing another player.
In October, Liverpool striker Luis Suarez was accused of racially abusing Man United defender Patrice Evra on the pitch. The FA banned him for 8 matches. Only days later, Chelsea captain John Terry was accused of shouting a racist insult at QPR's Anton Ferdinand. The case was taken to court and Terry found innocent. But now the FA are investigating the matter further. Then, in January this year, in an FA Cup tie between Liverpool and Oldham Athletic, a fan at Anfield was arrested after Oldham's Tom Adeyemi reported racist abuse from the stands. Visibly upset from what he'd heard, the game was stopped while the young midfielder calmed down. Those incidents put racist abuse in football back into the news in a way that hadn't been seen for 30 years. Back then, racism in football was a big problem. Black players were regularly abused by people on the terraces. They had to listen to monkey chants and even had bananas thrown onto the pitch. But until recently, we assumed that behaviour like that was in the past. Paul Elliott played for teams in England, Italy and Scotland in the 1980s, and he now works for the anti-racism campaign Kick It Out.
Paul, football's changed a lot over the years, but as a player, what was it like to be on the pitch and be racially abused?
Football has changed a lot, I agree. When I was playing, it was a very difficult working place, I would say, because football on the field of play was my place of work. I recall many occasions when I had possession of the ball, I was trying to pass the ball, there's lots of booing, lots of monkey chanting. I used to get a lot of racial abuse by supporters, at times by your fellow professionals. You know, football then, society then, was a very, very difficult place indeed.
How can you cope with that when you're on the pitch, trying to play your game and this kind of stuff is going on?
It wasn't nice. It was very unpleasant. Many people thought, well, it's just the norm, it's just the regular thing. You just have to accept it. And that's what we had to do.
It took years of campaigning by lots of high-profile people, including top managers and players, to make people realise that racism in football was unacceptable. Paul's stories are shocking, and it's clear we have come a long way since then. But do the Terry and Suarez incidents mean that the colour of a player's skin is still something that the fans and players use to abuse each other? Surely today's players shouldn't have to put up with it. Danny Shitu plays for Millwall. He's also played in the Premier League for QPR and Bolton and has represented Nigeria at the World Cup. Do you reckon racism is still in football?
I've been playing for the game for quite a few years now. I personally haven't really experienced it, but I've heard of it with a couple of my friends and a couple of other professional footballers of things that's been going on. You know, I've been in stadiums when you're playing and the fans just don't like you just because you're playing for the other team, but for you to have to go through it and suffer racial abuse, it must be real hard to deal with, because as a player you try and get onto that field and you try and switch off.
Even though you've not suffered racist abuse, what goes through your head when the kind of high-profile incidents like we saw with Luis Suarez last season happen?
It's just disappointing to see such things going on, you know, but I definitely believe it's getting better. We've just got to keep working on it, us as players and also the people that are running the game, to fix it.
So we're making strides, but there's still some work to be done.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
If racism is still an issue on the biggest stage, what effect does it have on other levels of the game? This is the Pro Touch Soccer Academy in London. They train kids of all ages to give them a helping hand in realising their dream of becoming professional footballers. Seeing that on the pitch between Liverpool and United, what did you reckon?
I thought racism was gone out of the game, because I thought they dealt with it a long time ago.
Did that worry you when you saw this kind of thing, and like the biggest stars in the game are doing this?
Yeah, because it just gives us the impression that when we make it, that might happen to us.
Have you ever experienced anything like that?
No, not personally. No.
Tavia, have you experienced any racism on the pitch? Have you seen it? Have you heard it?
Yeah, I've heard it. We were playing a tournament, and after the game, the boys started being a racist to our teammate that scored.
Even though it didn't happen to you, how did that make you feel?
Angry.
Being a Premier League star in itself is a really high place to be up on the table, and I think that if they do something bad, it will have an influence on like a lot of young children.
But these guys aren't the ones who make the rules that can change attitudes towards race in football. That's got to happen right at the top. And you don't get any higher than the man who runs FIFA. Sepp Blatter is in charge of football around the world, and I got a rare chance to speak to him.
Mr. Blatter, for the hundreds of millions of people around the world involved in the game, should they be worried about the state of racism in the game?
So we know that in our game is also affected, but I wouldn't say so much by what we call discrimination or racism. This is bad. This is bad, and this has to be kicked out.
So is it a cause for concern for you when some of the highest profile players in the Premier League are those who are involved with alleged cases of racism?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are worried about that because players at the highest level, professional players and coaches, they must be an example. They must be an example. And therefore, we expect the example of the great players. We have also another matter which is very important, I have to say. A handshake which is a very special one handshake, not this handshake. This handshake, where you really have to look into the eyes of the people. And this is also something where you are my friend, we play football, you are my opponent, but we will shake hands. We will shake hands, I will respect you because I look at you in your eyes.
So where do FIFA want to be in terms of racism in football? And how do you plan on getting there?
Yeah, I want to be in this zero tolerance, and to be accepted, that zero tolerance is accepted by everybody, but this is a long way to go.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the handshake.
It's not every day you get to speak to the most powerful man in football, but after spending time with him, I'm still not sure how he actually wants to tackle the problem. There are lots of other organisations that have been trying to kick racism out of the game. One man's been trying to do just that for the last 20 years. I've come here to Wembley to meet him. Lord Herman Ouseley is the chairman of Kick It Out, which he set up in 1993 to challenge discrimination in football.
One of the fundamental things I think about racism and things like racism is very often people who engage in these acts have very little respect for themselves. I think a lot of these people look in the mirror and don't like themselves, and so they've got to hate someone else and be disrespectful to someone else. And I think we've got to get people to think good about themselves and be respectful about themselves so that they be respectful for other people. And that's the challenge for all of us.
Lord Ouseley believes that to kick racism out of the game millions of people love, you have to change the way people think. Racism is a problem in society, not just in sport, but football definitely has a responsibility to set the standard. Whether what happened in the Premier League last season means that racism still exists in football or not, I think one thing is really important, that lots of people from all parts of the game do everything they can to kick it out, so that kids like these guys are treated fairly for their skills on the pitch and not for the colour of their skin.